this is just the beginning.
Welcome to Hard Truth Sports virtual event. I'm Nyla Boodoo, host of Axios Today's podcast, coming to you from my home in Washington, D.C. Thanks to League Apps for making this conversation on systemic racism in sports possible. Welcome to our audiences on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Axios.com. And you can follow along using the Axios Events hashtag or following Axios on Twitter. Over the next 30 minutes, our sports editor, Kendall Baker, and I will unpack the deeply entrenched inequities that shape our sports world, from youth leagues all the way to the most elite levels of play. Our first guest is ABC ESPN analyst and founder of the Jalen Rose Leadership Academy, Jalen Rose. Jalen, welcome to Axios Events.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate the love.
So Jalen, you're an analyst now, but of course you had an entire career playing. I wanted to start by asking, do you think it's easier now for players to speak out about social justice than it was when you were part of the Fab Five or when you were in the league?
Respectfully, it's never easy for Black or brown or an oppressed group of people to just have these discussions, and a lot of times with the people that are oppressing you in a lot of ways. So it can be uncomfortable because of obvious reasons. I think it's just different. And here are a few things that are different now with the socially conscious athlete versus, in the 50s, 60s, and the 70s. Say my favorite socially conscious athletes were Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell. You've seen the picture of the Ali Summit. Imagine if each of those players were getting paid the kind of money that athletes are getting paid now with their all-time greatness. Imagine those guys with hundreds of millions of dollars trending on being a billion. There was not a personality in sports to walk the face of this earth that was bigger and more glamorous than Muhammad Ali. He would have been the first billion-dollar athlete. So with money comes power. It gives you an opportunity for ownership. It gives you a chance to control your narrative. That's what players today have, along with social media. The other thing players today now have is they're more integrated families and communities than the separatism that existed when athletes were doing their protests, their marches, and trying to work for social change. If you look back at a lot of those protests, they were primarily Black people. If you look at the protests that happened after George Floyd was murdered or Breonna Taylor was killed, you saw various groups of people protesting for justice. And having other people join the fight means everything. And I've said white silence equals violence. So it's important to have that level of support. The other thing that athletes today now have is they're just fearless. And the beauty about young people is, as much as they take cues from us and they learn so much from us on how to navigate, ultimately when change happens, it's when they decide it's going to happen. And look no further than rap music. In the early 90s, I was bringing tapes to games to try to get the public address announcer to play the music while we warmed up. Now hip hop is everywhere. During the games, before the games, you see players, listening to their headphones, getting endorsement deals based on their love for music. In the early 90s, you probably heard Whoop, There It Is. And I'm glad to see Tag Team doing that commercial. I love it so much. Or This Is How We Do It. Like, those are like the only two. Or 69 Boys, like, they had a song too. But it was only like 3 songs. And so I think the emergence of rap music, and as it elevated itself into mainstream America and it became the profitable voice to pitch products, I think those 3 are the catalysts that allow athletes to now have the strength and the courage to speak out more so than athletes prior to their generation.
Jalen, on that theme of young people being fearless, I wanted to ask you about your charter high school and what kind of conversations do you have with especially those young athletes about what they're thinking about everything these days?
Well, the beauty about my grandmother once said, youth is wasted on the young. And what does that mean? It basically means that you're going to make bad decisions. You're going to make bad choices. There are a lot of things you need to learn and grow from in order to fulfill your goals and your dreams. And the reason why it was important for me to start a high school that also influenced college age students during their secondary education is not just the 400 that we influence in high school. It's also the 600 that we influence that are in college, universities, community colleges, trade school, or military. So it's 1,000 young people that we nurture. And to be frank with you, the reason why I wanted to approach that age of young people, because they're the most overlooked and underserved. Usually when people want to help Black or brown kids, they do it with the younger elementary age kids. And why is that? Because in a lot of fiscal dynamics of public school, you get the same amount of money from the state for a third grader that you get for an 11th grader. And we both know your teenager's problems are vastly different than your 7-year-old's problems. And so that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that parental involvement. When you're in second, third, fourth grade, you have parental involvement to wake you up in the morning, to bring you to school, to discipline you when you make bad choices. When you're in 9th, 10th, 11th grade, you've been jaded by society. You've been exposed to your community. You've been on social media. You've been exposed to sex, drugs, violence, gangs, things that happen into your community, decision-making, problem solving. How are you going to navigate your anger? And so based on those dynamics, it was important for me to be able to not only have these conversations, but have these conversations at an age of young people that understood these are the 4 most important years. I feel like the 8 most important years of a young person's life are the 4 that they're in high school or the 4 that they could be in college. You ask any adult where their goals or dreams went awry, usually it's during that 8-year period when you start getting a little older, start having more independence, starts being exposed to life type of thing. So that's why it was important for me to not only have these meaningful life conversations, but also have them with a group of young people that can actually apply them on the daily.
I want to go back to what you were talking about with athletes, in particular at the professional level, and money and power. I'm thinking about the fact that the NBA only has a handful of Black coaches. I think 4, if I'm counting right, 2 other men of color. But the NFL kind of gets all the pressure for not having enough diversity in its coaching ranks. How much are you concerned about the NBA and having coaches in these? Because that's a big position of influence and power as well.
I'm extremely concerned. And it's not just the NBA, as you mentioned, it's the NFL also, but it doesn't start coaching. It starts with ownership. Usually when you have an opportunity to hire, you're going to listen to voices that you're familiar with. And a lot of times they're going to not only look like you, but trumpet some of the things that you feel or think or say. And sometimes people don't want to go outside of their box, outside of their comfort zone. So it starts in ownership. You talked about the 4 NBA coaches in the NBA. There aren't 4 Black owners in both sports combined. And it's 64 teams. And so that then trickles to a low number of presidents, a low number of general managers, which plays itself out as a head coaching job. But when you look on the floor, it's primarily Black players. We look on the field, primarily Black players. So what that tells you is we're skilled enough to perform, but you don't feel like we're smart enough to be decision makers. And that's some of the fallout you now see with quarterbacks in the NFL. In particular, you see Russell Wilson, like, wait a minute, like I done got sacked more than anybody since I've been in the league. All I'm asking y'all to do is get me some help on the offensive line and y'all ignoring me? Y'all dismissing what I gotta say? And so that has to change in sports. But it's not a money thing. It's a power thing. A lot of these teams are family businesses now. They get passed from generation to generation. So it's not that they need someone to come in and be an owner or be a part of the ownership group for the money. you will be doing it for the diversity. And a lot of times, if people aren't forced to share in their business, they're not going to do it. And that's why it rarely happens.
Well, Jalen, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. A lot for us to think about. I feel like I would be remiss if I also didn't end by saying go blue. So thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Yes, indeed. I appreciate the love. Thank you.
Next, we have our View from the Top segment with my colleague, Senior Vice President of Events and Creative Strategies at Axios, Kristen Burkhalter.
Thanks, Nyla. I'm now looking forward to a conversation with the president of League Apps, Jeremy Goldberg. Jeremy, welcome to Axios.
Thank you, Kristen. Great to be here.
Jeremy, I think we should just jump right in. We have a lot to talk about. From your perspective, what is the hard truth about youth sports?
You know, like many in the audience, sports has had a profound impact on my life. I was never an elite athlete. So unless you count debate trophies, I think that the closest I got to a great sports accomplishment was the intramural wiffle ball championship at Georgetown. And then the closest I got to the majors was when Major League Baseball became an investor in League Apps. But what I have experienced firsthand is the profound impact that sports can have in my life, right? It helps you win at life. You learn resiliency, you learn teamwork, you ultimately learn how to lead. And the evidence is overwhelming. I think best illustrated in the Aspen Institute Project Plays data about the impact that sports can have in kids' lives today. Whether it's 40% higher test scores, a tenth less likely to be obese, lower rates of depression. It has profound impacts, but it also has impacts on their future. 15% more likely to go to college. Ultimately, 8% higher earnings in their lifetime, more productive and more prepared for jobs of the future, better physical and mental health outcomes. And what the data also tells us is that if you are a Black or brown child, if you are poor, if you have a disability, even based on your gender, you are less likely to access the benefits of playing sports. And as I'm sure we've seen in so many other sectors, COVID has made and magnified those challenges even more. So here's the truth. If playing sports can create so many advantages and benefits in life, when large number of kids don't get those benefits, it's not just an inequity, it's a form of advantage, right? It's a form of privilege, a sports privilege. And what makes that a hard truth is the fact that it's systemic, that it means that it's too complicated to try and explain in a segment like this, and requires a really focused solution, an enduring solution. And that hard truth also means that individually, if we've benefited from sport, we've had that advantage, or our kids have access to it, we need to acknowledge it, and we need to work hard to make sure that other kids and communities have the same benefits as we do. That's ultimately how we all win.
Definitely some stark statistics there, really highlighting the inequities. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So what are you and League Apps doing to address these inequities?
Well, it starts with our North Star, right? Our vision of a youth sports culture that can make the world better, and ultimately being a company that is elevating our mission to help youth and local sports leaders deliver amazing experiences for all. What we've realized is that if you really want to impact this as an issue and you want to impact society, the best way we can do that is to partner with the thousands of grassroots organizations that are out there across the country. We're the operating system and community for the leaders of these organizations. And we provide them with the technology and professional development they need to succeed. Because what we realized is that while the kids have to be kids, the organizations need to be professional, right? It's just too important for that not to be the case. So whether sports organizations are for-profit or nonprofit, whether they're full-time coaches or part-time coaches, volunteers, we see so much capacity and intention to change lives and communities. And so our role at League Apps is simply to support them, to enable them, encourage, connect them, and ultimately to solve gaps and identify where we can make a difference to address this issue.
And let's go a little bit deeper on the technology piece, something that you think about every single day. You know, is technology in youth sports part of the inequity, or is it part of the solution?
Well, we need to, I think, recognize two realities. Like every industry, technology will play a central role in the youth sports experience, right? It can create efficiencies, enables growth and scale in terms of number of participants and the kind of impact they can have. It can ultimately deliver a better experience for participants. But to answer your question directly, technology is not accessed equitably. And the organizations that serve those with the most needs often have the least resources or the capacity to invest in technology. We were inspired and saw this firsthand through our work with Major League Baseball and their clubs, especially the LA Dodgers Foundation first, where we help provide technology to support their incredible Reviving Baseball in Inner Cities program, RBI, and their youth academies. And we saw what could happen when those organizations had the support of Major League Baseball and their clubs, but also the role that technology could play ultimately in helping those organizations have their time back to spend with families and participants to make a difference. Or the ways that it made that parent that was working having access to the information they needed to make a game or practice, and ultimately to have those organizations grow in the number of participants. So we took that inspiration and we did something with it. And in the fall of 2019, we announced a goal to impact over 500,000 kids to access sport by the end of 2022. We're now halfway through that goal. And through the provision of our technology and also a percent of every transaction through our platform, we believe that we can make a difference here. So if anyone out there is listening and knows a great youth sports organization that could benefit from help, let us know or go to our website and nominate them. And if you're out there and you want to partner with us to make an impact in these communities, we welcome it.
Thank you for that commitment. I'll be sure to continue to track you all. I know you'll be successful there. Let's pivot a little bit. What is the role, do you think, that government needs to play here, specifically related to funding?
Well, like your Hard Truths series have all shown, any issue of systemic inequity or discrimination has an important role that institutions play in that problem and ultimately in that solution. So in youth sports, there are challenges of infrastructure, fields and transportation, not to mention funding, whether it's kids participating in sport through school or those to support the great community-based sports-based youth development organizations, yet if they had more resources, they could serve more kids. So we see a huge opportunity to help policymakers and private funders recognize that if they care about social injustice and inequity, youth sports is a great place to invest to address that as a strategy. When COVID hit, League Apps and a few other organizations decided to step up and launch, and now we help lead the Play Sports Coalition, which now includes thousands of grassroots organizations. And while initially we've been focused on simply ensuring that the youth sports providers survive this pandemic, where even now the assistance that the government has provided isn't really designed to support that industry, we also believe that plays can play an important role in really building a larger movement to address these systemic issues impacting how kids access sport. And the power of broad-based mobilization can't be underestimated. Right? We're reminded of that time and time again, and that will be true of youth sports. Just a quick example is in New York State right now, the Assembly have passed a bill as part of the legalization of global sports betting to take 5% of those fees and allocate that to support a fund to ensure underserved kids have access to sport. So we hope that passes the state Senate and the governor signs it, and we want to certainly do our part to make that happen because that's a tangible, immediate impact that institutions can play here.
And one final question, how can other stakeholders work together to address barriers in sport?
Well, implicit in the question is the recognition that it's not enough to talk about this, right? We have to take action. And when you're dealing with issues of systemic racism and inequity, it's not just about the action taken by those that are marginalized and left out, right? It has to include those with the power and the advantages to do something about it. So there's already great work that's trying to happen in the grassroots, and it's about amplifying that. But it's also about other organizations asking what they can do. And there's a special role that professional sports can play. Jalen and Justin have exemplified that, but it goes beyond athletes. And what we're seeing, especially through our close collaboration and partnership with professional leagues and professional clubs, is the kind of impact they can have. Because what they recognize is the fact that their future fans, their future players, and ultimately their future executives are going to be impacted by what happens in youth sports today. So whether that's Major League Baseball's work with RBI and Play Ball, the Junior NBA's initiative from the elite to the community organizations, the NHL's focus on growing through diversity, the MLS's engagement in soccer, they're trying to do their part. And I think it's an inspiration and invitation for others to do that.
Thanks, Jeremy, for this thoughtful conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. And thanks to League Apps for all that you're doing and for making this event possible.
Thank you for all that you're doing as well. Appreciate it.
Now over to our sports editor, Kendall Baker.
Hi, I'm Kendall Baker, and I am the sports editor for Axios. Our final guest is Chargers running back and social justice activist Justin Jackson. joining us from Los Angeles. Hey, Justin, thanks for joining us.
What's up, Kendall? Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with 2020. Obviously it was a monumental year in many respects, but speaking specifically, to athletes and athlete activism, in the wake of George Floyd's death and the social justice movement that followed, we saw NFL players and kind of athletes across the board speak out in ways we haven't necessarily seen before. So from your perspective as one of those athletes, what was last year like?
Yeah, I mean, it was, like you said, it was a whirlwind, but it really was powerful. In that moment, with the George Floyd protests, when a lot of teams decided not to do, their scrimmages that they had planned, and including the Los Angeles Chargers, we were all really excited and all, to have our first scrimmage at the new stadium. Most of us had never been there before, but that moment was so powerful for us that we said, we're going to be on NFL Network Live. Let's use this moment and time, to illuminate the issues, and not let, sports, which I think, in this country, a lot of times we like to use that as a distraction. And it is fun, and we love playing it. People love watching it. But in that moment in time, we wanted to use that platform to illuminate the issues that we face outside of sports, when we are mostly just Black men, or our white teammates were right there with us. And just face as a society and make sure we were illuminating those issues in that moment in time. So it was very powerful for myself, and to see a lot of, especially big name, people like Pat Mahomes, Michael Thomas, Malcolm Jenkins, just speak out like that. That meant a lot for I think for people like myself who aren't as big of a name.
And just like in terms of it kind of happening across sports, and it seems like leagues kind of coming together. Not that you guys aren't always kind of on the same page in many respects, and many of you are friends, but was there a sense of kind of camaraderie across the entire sports landscape last year as well that was kind of new?
Oh yeah, for sure. And really what sparked it obviously was the Bucks protests when they boycotted the playoff game, which was such a huge thing. Obviously the playoffs is what you work your whole season to get towards, and you're working to get to the finals, which is a lot of those players' lifelong dream. But to them, it was, the moment was so big and so powerful. What happened to Jacob Blake in Wisconsin, and they felt like it was a big enough event that they needed to, like I said, take eyes off of just the game of sports, so people could put their eyes on the issues that are in our society and what we can do to better those. So I definitely felt a connection with them when they did that, and I know a lot of other people around teams and guys around the NFL felt that same thing with MLB. So I did feel that camaraderie that you were speaking about.
Mm-hmm. And the tool, obviously, that outside of on-field protests and things like that, the tool that is being used in many of these cases is social media. Obviously, it's very pervasive in our society. It's not a new thing, but it still is evolving. And it seems like last year was another example of seeing the power of social media, particularly as it relates to athletes, and kind of changing that direct line of communication they have with fans, the ability for athletes to kind of come together and have this larger collective voice through social media. So it does seem like we're still kind of seeing it evolve in real time. Can you just kind of speak to that, and just how much, again, it's pervasive in our society, but it still seems like we're underestimating how much it changes in relation to athletes, kind of just the power of your collective voice and what you guys can do?
Yeah, I mean, it gives us a direct line of communication, to the fans and to people that look up to us, young, and it lets us be even more, you could use it the way you want to, and that's what's so powerful about it. You can control your own narrative, and it comes, direct from your mouth to the world. And so, that can be used not only to, like I said, kind of show us off the field and show what we care about and what we experience just on the day to day when we're not, in the helmet and the pads. But also, it gives us the ability to share and spread messages, far and wide. And, there's a very diverse group of people that, love sports, love athletes, and listen to our voices, which I think is why sports and sports figures are so, it's important for us to speak up on these issues, because, we do have that diverse group of people that follow us and listen to us, and, letting those people know and understand where we come from and our background and the things that we experience, I think is so powerful, because then they could, have that relatability or even if they haven't experienced it themselves, now, well, they're walking and marching in lockstep with us, even though they don't experience those issues. And that's how you create a movement.
Absolutely. And then just turning attention, we recently did a deep dive covering kind of the systemic inequities in sports, not just at the professional level, but kind of starting, youth sports through high school, through college, through pros, and these systemic inequities are often along racial lines. And, at the youth level, it's access to programs and college sports. There's so much revenue being built largely on the back of Black student athletes, and you have white coaches making millions of dollars a year. Can you just kind of speak to your journey as an athlete and seeing that along the way at all these different stops?
Yeah. I mean, you definitely see that. And, I think it is kind of a, microcosm, like you were saying, of the inequities within our society as a whole. But if you want to just focus more so, on the sports side, like you said, you have a majority Black player base, which is what generates the revenue, right? These people are coming, especially when you talk about NCAA, these people are coming to watch these players play. But then who is benefiting off of that is mostly, like you said, the coaches who are, for the most part, white. They're getting paid while the players are not. And then, these institutions, which, majority of these institutions, including the one I went to, the population of the student base is mostly white as well. So we need to make sure that we're pushing for pushing equity within sports as well. And that doesn't just mean having, a Black player base, but also having more Black coaches, having more Black owners, all that type of stuff. And like you said, seeing it growing up, it is tough seeing that because, you feel like as a Black athlete, I don't know if I could be a quarterback, I should probably just play running back or receiver position or DB, these kind of positions that are more typically afforded to Black athletes. But now you're seeing much more of, like I said, Patrick Mahomes. Like you see him, you're like, oh, that's the face of the NFL. And that's really cool to have, a Black quarterback in that position. And, we want to see more Black head coaches. We want to see more Black quarterbacks, just more equity within sports as well.
Awesome. And we have a question actually from an audience member in DC. They ask, the systemic racism that we see in sports goes beyond the leagues themselves. It's on the fans, viewers too. As an athlete, how do you see your role and those of your teammates, colleagues in other sports in combating this? How can you leverage your platform in order to make the fans understand that politics and sports have always gone hand in hand and that they can't simply ignore the humanity of athletes?
Well, that's a great question. I almost want to just reiterate it as it was asked, but yeah, and that's what I said. I think sports is really important, like I was saying earlier, because we do have a very diverse group of people that watch us, right? And so when we actually start speaking out on these issues and we actually start being like, I am more than just, your entertainment at the end of the day, right? Like I am a person as well. And when I step outside of the helmet and the pads, a lot of times, because we're not basketball players, we're not 6'8", 6'9", like we truly do experience the world just, as, a black man, and for the most part. So that's something that I think if we can, the fans already have such a relatability to us as players, right? And if we can extend that to having that relatability to us just as human beings, just as Black men functioning in the society, I think we can, like the person was asking, we can further, the equities in our system and just the understanding of the problems and the experiences that we face, in the Black community in general, in the workplace, in schooling. I mean, just in every part of our society. And so that's why I think sports is a very, very important vehicle to bring people together, because it already does, right? It already does bring a lot of people together from a bunch of different backgrounds to root for one team going towards an end goal. Now, if we can just transfer that over to society, then I think we'll have a much better society, more equitable society for all of us to live in.
Absolutely. And last question, really quick for you. You obviously went to Northwestern, which was kind of on the forefront of this, college athletes basically getting more rights. It's obviously transformed into name, image, and likeness. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that now that that's coming kind of to fruition. We're not there yet, but legislation is, in the works. You got some states making moves. Just curious your thoughts on that, having gone to Northwestern where you guys were kind of on the forefront of all this.
Yeah, extremely important. Extremely important. Obviously us as what people are coming to see, like I was saying earlier, what people are coming to see in college, we are, what makes the revenue. And so we should be seeing a piece of that revenue. At the very least, we should have we should own the likeness to our own name that was stripped away from us by the NCAA. So that is the first step, and I think we can build from there. There's a big push coming for that, and I think everyone's starting to understand that as the NCAA makes hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars off the backs of mostly Black athletes. That's a very unfair and unjust system that needs to be rectified.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, appreciate it, Kendall. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for another virtual conversation that has made everyone smarter faster. Thank you to our sponsor, League Apps, for making this event possible. And for more information or to sign up for my newsletter, Axios Sports, visit axios.com/newsletters or visit the Axios app. Also, if you're interested in sponsoring an event with Axios, visit axios.com/advertise for more information. Again, thank you all for joining, and we'll see you on axios.com.